Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules. And at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. Welcome to another edition of BOA The Revival. A couple of years ago, I had a show with a really cool guy named Darren Schaefer, who hosts the Cooper Vortex. And he was our first time we got into DB Cooper here on Binnall of America, despite being over 20 years old. We finally broke into the Cooper Vortex, and he was telling me how he got mixed up in all this, and sort of it was almost like a warning in a way about this. This is the vortex. Once you get into this, it's going to pull you deeper in. And it was a prophetic conversation a couple of years ago, or maybe a year and a half now, September of 24. Because since that time, we've gone deeper and deeper into the Cooper Vortex. We've talked to Drew Hurst Beeson. We've talked to Pat Boland a couple of times. And back in November, I knew I wanted to get tonight's guest on the show. We're finally getting around to it. Ryan Burns I think he's one of the preeminent DB Cooper researchers out there. He runs the website norjak.org, and also spell that for folks just so they can get it right. NORJAK.org. And he also has the podcast and YouTube channel DB Cooper Sleuth. And he's a maven, folks, and he's a maestro with all this stuff. And oddly enough, it's turned almost into a Thanksgiving tradition where Ryan and I could talk right on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, because I'll be writing up like clockwork, as I'm sure he knows. You can set your watch to something happening that week in November. And for the last couple of years, I've been covering it with Coast to Coast, and Ryan's been my go-to on that because he's been involved deeply with both those stories. So it's sort of turned into a weird tradition where Ryan and I exchange a lot of messages, and it's like, I got to get to the grocery store, dude. Come on. we gotta make sure this sounds right. Yeah, he's the guest tonight. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm deep in the Cooper Vortex now, and I always love talking about this case because it's sort of one where I really don't have to worry too much about the notes, because I know this case pretty well enough, I think, that I can hold my own with the Cooper heads out there. And we'll see tonight, because we got a big time member of the Cooper Vortex here, Ryan Burns. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's long overdue. I'm really looking forward to the conversation, Ryan.
Thanks for having me, Tim. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I've appreciated some of the things you've done for setting the record straight on some of the articles and news that have come out in the past couple of years that the media have jumped on. And it takes someone like yourself to actually set the record straight on some of these things. Obviously, with the Dan Greider stuff that we'll probably get into, I tried to alert CNN and everybody else who had the guy on that he was kind of a charlatan, and the damage was already done. I mean, he was on CNN and everything. And I mean, I even offered them, I said, look, I can give you Larry Carr, who was the last major case agent to actually work on the case with the FBI. He's a retired FBI guy now. I said, he'll come on CNN and talk about it and set the record straight. And they didn't seem to care because, but thankfully you did. I appreciate that.
I appreciate that. It's my pleasure, man, and my duty, I think, to, I am entrusted with this job to write about this crazy stuff. And so I need to get it right. That's kind of my attitude.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I'm glad you tried.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge on all these crazy stuff I read about. But yeah, for sure. Now, when we get a first time guest on the show, we start out with the bio, the background. Who is Ryan Burns, and how did you? I kind of told people. I mean, I always loved DB Cooper. It wasn't until I kind of was like, all right, now I'm going to start covering it on the show, that I got sucked into it more. But how did you get pulled into the Cooper Vortex?
Okay, well, just some background. I'm a Mississippian. I am way down south in the land of cotton, in in deep Dixie down here. And I'm an attorney. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I used to be a prosecutor, so I've done both sides of the law. I was a DA for a while, and then now I do criminal defense and specialize in expunging old criminal records because there, by the grace of God, go I. When I was 20 years old, I did things I just didn't get caught for, and so I have a lot of mercy for people, and so I do expungements, and I write expungement laws to help people clear old criminal records and things. But basically, as far as Cooper goes, I would say that really, I'm an old mystery nerd. Essentially, I remember being 10, 11, listening to Coast AM with Art Bell. Back in, this is like 1990 or something, and just listening to it. And because I've always loved aliens and stuff. And, I always tell people that I remember, in your school libraries when we were growing up, I'm sure you had an upbringing just like me, very Americana, that in every school library, there's the section of books that's like Bermuda Triangle. And
yeah.
And I just always liked that section. And so I've always loved the aliens and all that sort of stuff. And Coast to Coast really got me going on that. And part of that is watching shows like In Search Of and Unsolved Mysteries. And one of the ones that you frequently saw for In Search Of with Mr. Spock hosting it was the D.B. Cooper episode. And, just stuff like that. And then Unsolved Mysteries in syndication. In fact, I think it might have been the first or second episode of Unsolved Mysteries had D.B. Cooper as their feature story. It might have been the second episode, but at any rate, that would have been my first exposure to it, because really there just weren't many movies or TV shows about this, because the fact is it was an active investigation at the time in the 90s and 80s or whatever. And so the FBI had kind of put the kibosh on people who were witnesses talking about it to outside sources, because, it was an active investigation, and we can look at that now, since they have quote unquote closed the case. They have to release all their investigative files. So the FBI have been forced to release they've released about 50,000 of their files so far on the Cooper investigation. And they upload them every month, about 500 pages to the FBI's website. But at any rate, within those files, we can see documents from the 70s and 80s where they're telling witnesses, hey, look, we can't tell you who to talk to, but we can strongly advise you not to say too much, because basically they threatened them. They would say, if somehow information you reveal allows Cooper to continue to elude us, you're helping the bad guy. And so kind of guilt trip these people. So really there just wasn't a lot of documentaries and things about it. But then when I was in law school in 2006 or so, Larry Carr, the FBI agent I mentioned earlier, he picked up the case. And this was a time when at some point in the 80s, the D.B. Cooper case became what's called a hobby case for the FBI, which means that an agent would still have the case, but they were basically told to only work on it in their off hours. Don't spend government time on it.
Gotcha.
Et cetera. And Larry took over the case at some point around 2005, 2006 from another guy who was tired of it. And Larry came from the bank robbery section of the FBI, which obviously the FBI do a lot of bank robberies. That's one of their specialties. And with bank robberies, as Larry will say, people are caught because people talk. Essentially, people rat on people. That is how bank robbers are solved. Most bank robbers are not caught through forensics or whatever. They're just caught because the FBI put out, hey, we're looking for this person, and somebody talks and gets a reward. And that's just how it is. And so Larry said, well, let me try that with the Cooper case, because we've been so guarded with this Cooper stuff for so long. Let me go to a public outreach. Let me go to the public. Let me go to the news media and say, hey, look at this. And for example, it was not really known that D.B. Cooper had left his tie on the plane until Larry in 2005 or 2006 showed it on TV. Here, look at this tie. And everybody's like, oh my God, that was the first time it had ever been seen. D.B. Cooper tie. And it's just because the FBI, for some reason, their idea was that they wanted to be able to suss out pranksters or false confessors by saying, oh, well, what did you leave on the plane?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now, granted, I mean, I don't know what the utility of that really was compared to the utility of, showing it to the public back then, because it did have a sort of unique tie clip. It's not a crazy unique tie clip, but it was unique enough to where, in conjunction with the sketch, you might say, do you know somebody who wears a tie like this with a tie clip who looks like the sketch? Then maybe they could have generated more leads. But regardless, Larry came out and did a media outreach in about 2006 or 2007. And I remember being in law school in one of my classes, playing on the internet, and came across an article about it. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And then you get down, start Googling things, and you get sucked in deeper. And eventually you're caught in this friggin' vortex, they call it, and you cannot escape. And I don't know anybody. I mean, it is rare for someone to escape the Cooper vortex, but I would say it's been about almost 20 years for me now, but not as dedicated as I am now. I didn't become super dedicated to this until about 5 years ago, probably around COVID. Once my business kind of got settled to where my business kind of runs itself and I had free time. I often say that a lot of lawyers, they play golf. I D.B. Cooper I don't play golf. So, but I D.B. Cooper. So that's kind of how I got into it, was just this FBI agent on TV showing off this tie and talking about it. And that's kind of how I got sucked in.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the case has really kind of gotten a lot bigger, like in the last 5 or 10 years. It was sort of like it was a well-known mystery, but now you can really see the community that's grown around it, and it's become a very big thing. And I was thinking about, as you were talking about that, in large part, I think too, thanks to the internet. It's like, I can't imagine how any group of people could get together and sort of research this in the 80s or 90s. No. Because it was just, people were all over the place. You couldn't really exchange information. And this is a case that is really reliant on the information we have. Yeah.
And we didn't have, again, until the FBI, just in briefly, what occurred is the FBI got tired of dealing with kooks and cranks, calling them all the time. And they decided to, in 2016, on this, there was a History Channel show called D.B. Cooper Case Closed, and they had the Seattle. Just for those listening, that's the D.B. Cooper case. It's part of the Seattle FBI's jurisdiction, because the exchange of, even though the hijacking started in Portland, the actual extortion part of it happened on the ground at SeaTac there, and so it was given to the FBI in Seattle. It's their case. So they had the FBI director in Seattle, go on TV and say, okay, we're closing this case and yada, yada. They didn't actually close the case. I mean, that was just media hype, but
like theatrical too. Do you like close the file cabinet drawer?
Yes. I mean, literally in the documentary at the very end of it, shows them boxing up things, and but they never actually closed it. It was theater of the absurd, really. But the problem was, for them at least, is that for all these years, they were able to hide behind FOIA and the Freedom of Information Act. If anytime somebody would FOIA D.B. Cooper documents, for example, I'm FOIAing for the witness statements of the passengers. Right. The FBI would say, well, this is an active investigation, and that precludes us from doing that. It's an exemption from FOIA, is government action, or active government investigation by law enforcement. And so when they closed the case, a very clever lawyer named Mark Zaid, who is a civil rights kind of guy, Zaid sued them and said, hey, look, you can't hide behind FOIA anymore. If you went out to the public and you said you closed this case, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And a federal judge agreed and said that the FBI have to release all of their case files. And there's about 80,000 pages, we think. And they've released about 50,000 so far. Like I said, each month they release these. And so before 2017, when these files were released for the first time, it was complete hearsay. I mean, it was, it was relying on old news articles. If somebody could track down and go knock on the door of a passenger and bother them and say, oh, what do you remember? It was that sort of stuff. And that stuff is really, willy-nilly, it's not good evidence. I mean, I prefer as a lawyer, especially, to have the original evidence, the original documents. And now we have the original documents. And so this community could not have existed in the way it exists now 15 years ago because there wasn't enough information out there to spend all our time. I mean, I've got, 50,000 pages OCR scanned, so I can just type in whatever I want and find it in these 50,000 pages. And the FBI themselves couldn't have dreamed of something like that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So but it's a great case for the internet age, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Now, as I mentioned, we did talk through messages back in November, but I was like, I got to get Ryan on the show as soon as I can. Because back in November, you and a colleague had gotten your hands on this audio tape, and this blew my mind. I still think it was like one of the biggest sort of paranormal, unsolved mystery story of the year. I was like, this is, for someone who's into the Cooper case, this was like, I can't, otherworldly. It was, it's like, creepy. It was creepy. It's like unreal because you're listening to the pilots talking to a representative from the airline, and another person. Maybe you'll fill me in. I think
air traffic controllers and things.
Yeah. And just to set the stage for people, and this is all going on when the plane had landed to refuel, and all the passengers get off, and some of the stewardesses get off, and Cooper's there with Tina Mucklow and the pilots. Yep. They're not together. He's in the back with Tina. They're in the front, and they're talking about what's going on. And it's like, you're a fly on the wall. This is a real recording.
You can hear it. I mean, you can hear the emotion, honestly, in their voices. Because we had the transcripts. What's fascinating is that basically we have the transcripts of some of what was said over the radio during the incident. Okay. But it turns out that a lot of stuff wasn't in these transcripts. What we have is they had a kind of almost like a Twitter sort of thing at the time called AirInc, which was this sort of, it was a teletype. It was almost like somebody was listening in real time, and almost like a stenographer in real time is typing. Yeah. So it was kind of hit or miss. We had these transcripts of what the pilots were saying to the outside world, but we never heard the actual audio. And still to this day, even though I'm the one, my colleague Nikki Broughton is the one who actually got the tapes. There is a individual who has made us, we know who she is, and she is a real person, but she has made us swear that we won't reveal who she is. But she has the original audio cassettes of the plane communicating with Northwest Airlines and with the outside world. And she is elderly and gave us basically hit randomly to about 12 minutes of audio that I was able to try and restore. But of those 12 minutes, you can hear it on my DB Cooper Sleuth channel. But of those 12 minutes, you can hear a lot of emotion from the pilots because we get to hear a good bit about the refueling kerfluffle. Cooper asked for the plane to be refueled immediately upon landing in Seattle because he wanted his money. He said, "Don't land in Seattle until my money's ready and the parachutes are ready. And I want the plane refueled immediately." Well, they get down there and it takes them an hour and a half to refuel the plane. Normally, 727 can be refueled with one fuel truck in 15 minutes. And it took him an hour and a half. And Cooper's back there screaming and hollering. And this was about as upset as he got, because Cooper did seem to know enough about airplanes. And in fact, that's one of the things you hear in the audio is the pilot saying, this guy seems to know a thing or two about an airplane.
Yeah, that's one of those lines where you're like, when you're listening, you're like,
hear it.
Oh, shit. Yeah, well, it's anytime in the audio when they're talking about Cooper. Of course, they don't call him DB Cooper because he didn't have that name. Yeah,
he's their friend in the back or whatever they.
They talk about him. It's like, oh shit.
The guy in the back is
talking about DB Cooper. It's really awesome.
It's amazing, but because the guy is literally as they're saying this, the guy is sitting 70 feet behind them. In the cabin, the real guy. Or, you're near the end of the audio, Tina Mucklow is in the cockpit because Cooper had just let her go. And at the very end of the audio, we can hear them saying, Miss Mucklow has indicated to us that the man has the money tied to his body, and he's wearing 2 of the parachutes, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, well, damn, she just walked through the cockpit door having been with the guy. And here we're hearing this. And it's really chilling, but it took 4 fuel trucks to refuel this damn plane. And it wasn't any shenanigans. It was just a weird sequence of events. But Cooper's back there screaming, I will blow this plane up. Like something, you guys are playing games with me. Something's going on here. And the pilots are screaming, basically. They're saying, hey, you get this, you get out here and start pumping gas now. Or you can hear them screaming, like they're like, we're sending the fuel truck to you guys. And they're like, I hope that thing is full. I mean,
they're like snippy about it. Yeah.
There's a great line on that. He says, I hope that thing is full. He's getting awfully antsy back there.
Yes. Yeah.
Very pilot speak. Because remember, these are professional men. These are Air Force veterans, and they're all like, they're doing the whole, calm, cool pilot thing. In fact, you can hear the great voice of, he died last year. The co-pilot died in November, right after right before we found the audio.
Yeah.
And I made sure to send it to his family. But the co-pilot died, and he's the main talker. Bill Radicek was his name. He's the main guy. He has this beautiful baritone voice, and it's almost like he is the template of the pilot voice, right?
Yeah.
And there's a great line that I think about when I hear his voice in the audio. One of the passengers, a U.S. attorney, was on the plane who actually prosecuted some D.B. Cooper stuff later on. He was actually a passenger on the plane. He's telling news media in the terminal of the airport right after he gets off the plane. He's telling them, he goes, the pilot came over the intercom and said that they had technical difficulties. Because remember, for those listening, the passengers had no idea they had been hijacked until they were off the plane, which is just remarkable. That's how cool and calm Cooper was, and how in control he was of everything, is that he's just sitting in the back smoking cigarettes, and the passengers have no idea. But anyway, this passenger, he's in the terminal, and he's talking to media, and he goes, that pilot, he had a voice that would make you feel calm on the way to the guillotine. And it, sure enough, you can hear Radicek has this great voice, but he's keeping his calm, saying he's getting awfully antsy back there. He even cusses at one time. He says, they're saying, you can hear him saying, do you want this other fuel truck to come up? He goes, yes, we do want the fuel truck to come up, damn it.
Yeah. That was, you could tell. Yeah. Even that from the time in his role and his job, that you knew that was like, all right, this for him is like, he just snapped. These guys, it's like, look, I mean, the thing is, Cooper was freaking them out a little bit because he was very professional, and most hijackers at the time were just lunatics. They were schizophrenics, certifiable people who would. Most of these hijackers, look, for those who don't know that era, it's called the golden age of hijackings. There were over 150 hijackings in American airspace between 68 and 72. 150. I mean, sometimes there were multiple ones a week. And so this happened so frequently that it was almost like a badge of honor if you were a passenger, because, we're going to Cuba. It was almost always people going to Cuba. Yeah. It was these crazed communists or lunatics who just were out of their mind and they want to go to Cuba. But here comes this one guy all of a sudden saying, I want money and I want parachutes. And they're like, what in the hell is this guy up to? And he has a very, very convincing looking bomb. And to this day, we're debating whether Cooper's bomb is real or not. And I am completely agnostic. I have no opinion. I can literally see an argument either way, 100% of the way, either way. I don't know. But he made it very convincing. He made it too convincing, more convincing than he needed to. He could have just said, there's a bomb in my briefcase, and that would have been enough. I have a question. I'm sure that you've explored this question, so I'm sure you might have an answer to this. Would a bomb survive falling from an airplane like that, like a handmade bomb or whatever, or would it blow up when it hit the ground just out of sheer I don't know how bombs work. So
yeah, well, basically, this was a dynamite bomb, and dynamite is set off through blasting caps.
okay,
And
so even just falling out of a plane hitting the ground would make it blow up. Okay.
no, not at all. Not at all.
Right.
And so that's why, if it was real, Cooper had no problem just tossing it out the back, which is probably what he did. There's no indication that he tied this briefcase bomb to himself. We know from the other, Cooper inspired at least 16 copycat hijackers, and 5 of these guys actually got to jump out with ransom attached to their bodies, just like Cooper did, and in the months after the hijacking. And we know from them that they just tossed their bombs out the back because who cares? And so, but Cooper's may have been real. It basically, the stewardess who sat next to him for 5 hours and had a good view of this bomb for a lot of this time, she was the daughter of an electrician, and she grew up around wires and things, and she had a really good memory for it. And she was able to describe the bomb. We have a really, really, really good description of the bomb from Tina Mucklow, and where the wires went and how it was connected to this battery terminal and things like this. And that bomb has been reproduced by some Marines about 15 years ago, some Marines with EOD ordnance who were interested in Cooper, tried to make their own Cooper bomb, and it went off. And so with dynamite, so Cooper did it. It would have been functional if it had been real. So it possibly was real.
So so I don't know how deeply you want to go into how this audio emerged, but so this elderly woman contacts your colleague, and I thought I read somewhere that there was a lot of audio.
Well,
you guys only have a little bit, but what else could audio?
3 hours of it.
What else could be on the 3 hours though? I mean, if they were only at Seattle for an hour and a half, was this also like them when they were up in the plane?
Yeah.
Also. Oh wow. Okay.
It's got basically from them. It's my understanding that the audio is it's when they're circling Seattle. It kind of begins when they're circling Seattle. They had to circle Seattle for about an hour and a half, waiting for all this stuff to come. Because Cooper asked for some weird shit, and this is the day before Thanksgiving, around 5 p.m. I mean, it's pretty much rush hour traffic. Bad time to be doing this, and everybody's trying to leave early, and so. But yeah, the audio is going to be them circling. It's going to be them. We know what we're really excited about is it's just weird because this woman, she is, like I said, she's an elderly lady, and she's not very technically advanced. And so really the audio we have is her holding her iPhone up to an old tape recorder.
Oh,
and
Jesus.
So it's like, it's not good audio, but I mean, I was able to get some good stuff out of it, but so, I mean, if we could ever get our hands, I mean, she may have to pass away before we get her hand. I don't know, but it still exists. There's about 3 hours out there, we think. That's what's her. And she won't give it. She just is very odd about it. And that's her right to be. We don't know how she got a hold of these tapes, but the thought is that, look, it is not illegal even now to record FAA frequencies. It's not at all illegal to do that. And so the thought is that there was a radio pirate back then. Essentially, somebody was just listening in, and
right.
Some ham radio enthusiast or something, some nerd in the basement was just recording it, and somehow that audio got passed down, and that's what this audio is. But
it's incredible lost media.
Oh, it's amazing lost media, and what's wild about it is that, because of the last thing that we have in the audio, the last thing we have is Cooper's about 5 minutes from jumping. The last fragment that we got from the lady, which means that we're going to have the audio of the so-called pressure bump, which is Cooper jumping. Okay. We know when Cooper jumped because of when he jumped, the stairs reacted a certain way, and it forced air into the passenger cabin, and into the passenger cabin into the cockpit, and it
jostled the air calf, presumably.
It popped their ears, and so it's called this pressure spike. And they know that this is what meant they know that this was Cooper jumping because they recreated this with the Air Force of about a month later took the actual plane, the same exact plane, got the same exact flight engineer, and they flew around and they shoved a 200-pound sled off the back of the stairs, and it caused the same exact pressure spike. And all five of these copycats I talk about who jumped out, all five of them also caused a pressure spike when the stairs reacted a certain way. So we know when Cooper jumped, and we actually have in the transcripts, we can have it written, but it'd be nice to hear it. This same pilot who, with the great baritone voice, he goes, oh, and because his ears piped. It's like, what the hell is going on?
Right. Yeah.
And it'll be great to have the audio of that. Yeah, Cooper jumping, but we don't have that yet. So it's amazing lost media, and I think one day we're going to have it. And then you have people saying, well, is it possible, because Cooper was talking on the interphone to the guys in the cockpit, they're like, well, is it possible we could have Cooper's voice bleeding over somehow? And no, the answer is no, sadly, because the radio frequency to the outside world from the cockpit was a different channel than the interphone line. So so we're not going to get Cooper voice at all, sadly. And for those wondering, back then, the cockpit voice recorder would refresh. It would tape over itself every 30 minutes. So the plane flew for another 3 hours after Cooper jumped. Because they didn't know if he was still on the plane or not. They landed in Reno. And so there's no cockpit voice recording either of this communication. Otherwise, if it didn't tape over itself, we would probably have Cooper's voice talking to them through the interphone. But so that's just and what's sad is I've never, because the crew, the flight engineer is still alive, and I've tried to contact him, and he's in his early 90s, and it's difficult. But I wanted to ask the pilots, having spoke with Cooper, having heard his voice, what was your take on him? Did you think he was a colleague of yours? Did you think he was a contemporary? Yeah. Was he on your same socioeconomic intelligence level, or was it just a thug? And I get the sense, I don't know what they would have said, but we know from some of their comments, the pilot told the media afterwards that this man was as rational as one could be who would do such a thing. They were amazed at how just chilled out this guy was. And that is why some people think he may have been a special forces guy or somebody who was a veteran who was not afraid of things bothering him.
Well, hopefully, I hope there's at least some kind of like idea or plan or something to that these tapes just don't vanish when this away. But so I don't know necessarily,
we're staying on top of it. I mean, we're
all right.
We're trying.
I would wonder, I don't know how much was recorded by this teletype thing you're talking about, but I do wonder also, maybe there's something in those tapes, just some offhand remark. Maybe someone would have said something they noticed or something that but they forgot about afterwards. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's just some thing where the guy could be like, yeah, it was, which one do you think, they're talking, which guy do you think it is? And it's like, the guy who had the scar on his hand or something. It would be like some little detail that maybe got forgotten afterwards, but came up in the moment. You never know. It did. That would be really cool.
The audio did give us one thing that was completely new to all of us. So for a while, it's well known that Cooper, one of the parachutes, Cooper was given 2 backpacks and 2 front pack parachutes. These front pack parachutes, these are your reserve chutes. Think of paratroopers wearing those little parachutes out front, right? Mm-hmm. That's what those were. And one of them was given to Cooper, was a instructional parachute. It was a dummy parachute. It wasn't a real parachute. It was for training only, and it had training only written on it. And so, but for whatever reason, that parachute was not found in the plane when it landed in Reno. So people said, what the hell? Did Cooper jump with a dummy parachute? And we go, well, no. And it was determined that he did not jump with this front parachute because these front parachutes clip on to your backpack harness. Okay, with these things called D-rings. And Cooper famously was not given D-rings. The backpacks that he was given did not have these clips on them to clip a front reserve on. And Cooper himself, when the young lady, the stewardess, brings these parachutes to him in the back, he goes, "Hey, where are the D rings?" Like, it's like it'd be like if you requested a truck and a trailer at a rental place, and the truck they gave you didn't have a trailer hitch. You're like, well,
Right.
wouldn't you know I needed a trailer hitch if I asked for a trucking trailer? Well, so Cooper's like, "Where are the D rings?" And of course, this girl has no idea what D rings are, and she just kind of shrugs. But at any rate, so Cooper had no way of wearing, practically, even if it was functional, wearing this front reserve. So it was always assumed that Cooper just tossed it out the back at some point for whatever reason. But in this audio, we can hear, and this was not recorded anywhere on the teletype or anything. At the very end, when the stewardess enters the cockpit because Cooper's about to jump and he sends her away, the pilot says, "Miss Mucklow indicates to us that he has the money tied around his person and is wearing 2 of the chutes." And we're like, what? 2 of the chutes? So, which means that Cooper did jump with this front reserve. Now, obviously, he could not wear it as a parachute, but he was wearing it somehow. He had tied it to himself somehow, this front reserve parachute. Now, remember, this is a dummy parachute, and Cooper seemed to know what he was doing with parachutes. Otherwise, why would he be doing this?
Yeah.
With, I mean, again, I don't scuba dive. I don't like the water. I am not going to come up with a heist that involves me scuba diving to escape. Right. Just stupid. So Cooper knew what he was doing with parachutes. So it turns out, though, that Cooper may have taken this dummy reserve with him because paratroopers are taught back then. Paratroopers were taught that if they are caught in a tree, if their backpack parachute opens up and gets caught in a tree, they can get down from a tree by opening their reserve parachute, meaning that, like, if they're hanging from a tree 20 feet up, they will open their front reserve, and this front reserve parachute will just fall to the ground, just like a lump of cloth, Yeah. It still has these shroud lines attached to the container, and the container is attached to your backpack, so you can wiggle out of your backpack and shimmy down.
Okay. Just wonder where that was going. Okay, I got it now.
Yeah.
All right.
And so, yeah, it's interesting. And so now this was not something that was known. That's not an intuitive idea that anybody would intuitively come up with. And skydivers at the time, we have asked veteran skydivers who are in their 70s and 80s now, is this a trick that you guys were taught? And they said no, but it was taught to paratroopers from the World War II era and the Korean War era. And paratroopers even today are taught this trick. So it seems like Cooper, that's a really big clue. 2 things. Now we know that Cooper did jump with this dummy parachute, which we did, and we do know that this dummy parachute did have the shroud lines still attached. Okay, we do know from the guy who supplied it that it did have these lines. So Cooper probably did that. So we know that Cooper took this parachute with him that we thought he just threw out, and we know that this is a really, really, really strong clue that Cooper had a paratrooping background.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. All right. So these tapes already are proven fruitful.
This is a massive, massive deal.
Yeah. I'm really surprised. I was kind of disappointed because I did sort of a breathless write-up there for Coast to Coast. I thought this would get a lot more national attention, and it really didn't. And it's like, this is like an incredible discovery. I'm really, I'm waiting. I know how the media works, because I'm waiting now. One day someone from some other place, CNN or something, will stumble upon this
and
thing.
We won't get the credit.
Yeah, and they'll write the story up. Well, you'll get the credit because it's all your thing. But they'll be like, oh, Binnall wrote about that right when it happened. And then all of a sudden it'll go everywhere, and they'll be like, oh, D.B. Cooper.
But it should. Again, it is lost media. I mean, we just never had anything like this ever. And to actually hear the pilots' voices and stuff is remarkable.
It really is. It's tremendous. When I had Pat on, she mentioned you have a suspect. But my initial question, though, is like, as you've gone into this, did you ever hone in on a suspect? You presented one or something at CooperCon last year, back in November. But like, is this like your 8th suspect, or is this the first time you've ever landed on someone?
Everyone falls in love with suspects at different times, but I have tried to, I try to be a historian of this case at this point. I do have a history degree. I worked for the Department of Archives and History before going to law school. I was a history teacher. So I try to be a historian of this case more than anything else. And I try to be objective. And it's difficult to be objective when you have suspects that you're pushing as Cooper.
Right.
And so I get emails, I guess, as a face of the Cooper case, sort of one of the faces. I do get emails and comments from people who are saying, "Oh, I think my uncle was Cooper, yada yada." I get this monthly, and and you never know when it's the right one. I mean, you never know, and so I always take them seriously. I say, "Okay, well, why do you think this? Show me some pictures, yada yada." And I had a person who approached me and said, "Look, I think my father." I might have been Cooper. I don't want my father to be Cooper, but I think he might have been, and which was an interesting way to say it. She's like, I don't want him to be Cooper. Please say that my dad was not Cooper.
Right. She's like coming to you to hopefully debunk her theory.
And I couldn't, which is rare. I can debunk anybody as a suspect, and I could not debunk this person. And I thought I was crazy, and I messaged a few other super hardcore people on the super hardcore Cooperites, we call them, on the down low, and was like, "Hey, can you poke a hole in this guy?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, Jesus. And so we just couldn't kill this guy. And but the family was not. This guy's daughter, she's in her 70s. She wasn't ready for any media attention.
Yeah.
And I wasn't gonna. I wasn't trumping. I wasn't stumping for this suspect.
Right.
I wanted the. If a suspect comes along, I want the masses to know about them and to investigate them. I'm not pushing for a suspect, but I think it's noteworthy if a plausible suspect shows up. And that's all we want. All we want are plausible suspects, because most suspects are dog shit. Yeah. Almost all of them actually are dog shit. But this guy is not. And the family did let me at CooperCon give a private showing of his photographs and things, and there were lots of oohs and ahs in the audience, and as there should have been, and people were just like stunned, because this guy really is about as good as you can get. I don't think. I really don't think that. I don't know how you could improve this person as a suspect. I don't think you could. I don't know if they're Cooper. In fact, given the number of millions of men who could have been Cooper, he's probably not Cooper. But I mean, he's got a 1% chance, which is a hell of a lot better than most do. Yeah. And like I said, I cannot kill the guy as a suspect. He was a special forces guy who came into a lot of money, verified money. That I have seen the family have supplied me with his bank records and things from back then. And he came into a lot of money all of a sudden after being a poor staff sergeant his whole career, just some grunt, and died with many $100,000 in the mid 70s. He was run off the road and killed in Vegas in the mid 70s, weirdly, in a weird kind of creepy kind of thing. But this guy was a real badass kind of guy who would not have been perturbed by anything. And I would say one of the things that really startled me about him was that Bill Mitchell is a guy who sat across from Cooper. Bill Mitchell was a college student back then. He was 20 years old. Yep. Famously, if anybody has seen my videos or anybody has seen any of the documentaries, Bill is always on these shows because he sat across from Cooper for hours and hours and hours and was bored because they were circling over Seattle, and was jealous because he could not figure out why this babe, remember, this is the 1971, this is the era of the sexy stewardesses in go-go boots and short skirts and stuff. Couldn't figure out why this babe was hanging out with, to quote, this geeky old guy instead of me, strapping football player, 20-year-old college student from the University of Oregon. Why is she ignoring my existence, he says. And so he basically just stared at this guy and mean-mugged Cooper for about 2.5 hours, just picking on the guy, bored, because there's no cell phones on the plane or anything. He's just hanging out. And the stewardesses had a reason to pay attention to Cooper, but none of the passengers had any reason to pay attention to this guy because they had no idea who he was or that he was a hijacker. Right. He was a passenger. But Bill Mitchell, though, was paying attention to Cooper because he was jealous. And so now one of the things sitting right across from Cooper was he had a unique angle at Cooper. He had a side profile angle of Cooper that nobody else had. And he talked about how Cooper had this strange turkey waddle under his chin, this loose skin. And Bill in we have the FBI files now that are being released. And so we can see what he told the FBI that night. And he's describing it as like loose skin. He goes he calls it flabby skin. He says there was something strange about the guy's neck. And this suspect who I presented, turns out that during World War II, when he was about 20 years old, on the opening days of the Battle of the Bulge, he was with the 101st Airborne Division. He was shot he was hit in the neck with shrapnel, and it took out a chunk of his neck.
Wow.
And of course, for those who know their history, the Battle of the Bulge, the 101st Airborne were surrounded in Bastogne for about 2 weeks, and they were encircled by the Germans. And so he had a terrible field surgery, like in the field on his neck. And his daughter talked about how as he got older, this surgery would start to sag. And we have photographs, sure enough, of this guy with this sagging skin, kind of weird, droopy thing. And the guy was in shape. So it wasn't like a fat guy who had a turkey neck. It was this weird thing. And, I sent a picture of that. I texted it to Bill Mitchell. I was like,
I was going to ask you. Oh, this is why I'm a big fan, Ron, because you're.
Yeah, and I texted it to Bill, and I said, "Look, I'm not bothering you, Bill. Me and Bill are buddies. Me and Bill text about football every weekend.
Yeah,
we're I've known Bill for years now. We're legitimate friends." And I was like, "Look, I know you don't remember anything about Cooper," and he admits it. He goes, "Look, if anybody asks him about Cooper, he goes, look, do you remember the face of a substitute teacher you had one time in the third grade?"
Yeah.
It's like, no, I can't remember anything. But Bill does remember Cooper's neck. He just always has this. If you ever see Bill comes to CooperCon every year. So there's a plug for you. We have our Cooper conference every year in Vancouver, Washington. And Bill's always there. And Bill always kind of does this thing with his neck. Like he's like, he has this kind of weird thing. And I sent this to Bill and I was like, Bill, what do you think of this guy's neck? And Bill just responded. He was like, well, I can't reject it.
That's pretty good.
Looks about right. And so to have a suspect who has all these qualifications and has this weird neck anomaly, and this guy, a month after just to put it out there, I'll say this briefly, not to give too much out, but this guy had his house foreclosed on in 1970. Okay. He lost his house because he had no money he was a sergeant in the military and had a wife who spent a lot of money. And his house was foreclosed on. Okay, they bought a house for under the national average in 1969, which was I think that they bought this house in '69 for about $22,000. The national average was like $24,000 at the time. Okay, so he defaults on this house in 1970. A month after the hijacking, he and his wife buy a house in Las Vegas. Okay, for twice the national average. Okay, so. You generally default on a home. You're not getting lending people lending you money for a house that is twice the national average. You better have a damn good down payment or pay for it in cash. And so this is all verified that he bought this house and all this other stuff, all this other weird stuff. He bought a yacht.
Interesting.
And he was a very good poker player. And Vegas is a perfect place to launder your dirty money if you are DB Cooper. But anyway, so yeah, there is a suspect out there. Like I said, I don't know if he's Cooper. I'm not pushing him as Cooper, but and eventually I'll be able to announce his name and people can dig into him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he has a very, very, very common name. His name is not Bill Smith, but it's close enough that it's sad because there was a suspect years ago who is still a suspect for some people, and I got involved in researching him, named Milton Vordal. And he is the only Milton Vordal in all of human history. Truly, which is very nice for us when you're researching someone, right? But this guy is basically Jim Jones, and it's just like, ugh. But at any rate, he'll be released at some point.
Now, it sounds like he's a very strong suspect. But one of the things I sort of grappled with when I talked to Pat Boland back in November was how I guess what would it take to even solve this case? I guess you would need, as she pointed out, I think the money or something from that night, something from the hijacking that would be in in the attic somewhere where it's like, oh shit, here's the parachute as we ran into last couple of years ago with the claim.
So basically, you've got it's called actionable evidence in the law enforcement world. So that's why the FBI will only talk to you about Cooper if you bring them a body, a parachute, or some of the money. That's it. They're like, they will not answer the phone. And that is why Dan Grider, who quote unquote found this parachute in the former home or in some shed of copycat Richard McCoy's mother's house or whatever a couple years ago, which we debunked this parachute that he found as being Cooper's parachute within 5 minutes. It was so clearly not Cooper's parachute. But that is why the FBI did pick up the parachute, and Dan got to thump his chest and go, oh, well, the FBI came and got it. Well, yeah, they're going to do that because they said they would. I mean, I could call them and say, I found a parachute and I think it's D.B. Cooper's, and they would come get it. Yeah, I really could. But basically, you need money. Finding money in Papaw's attic, essentially, that sort of thing. Or the real holy grail out there is this hair slide. The one that got lost. It's missing, yes. Essentially, when the FBI stormed the plane in Reno and the plane landed and Cooper was not aboard, they went through with magnifying glasses looking for everything, and they found a couple hairs on Cooper's headrest. Okay. And now who knows if it's Cooper's hair, but they thought it probably was. So, because it was male, brown, Caucasian hair. And they mounted this on a microscope slide because back then there was a thing called hair microscopy, which is where they would get the hair. You could get the hair from a crime scene. And if you found a hair at a crime scene, you could compare it to the hair of a suspect and say, it's kind of an early DNA sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Now, it has been, a bunch of people have been released from prison. It has now been crack science. Essentially, it was shenanigans. It's been, all these cases have been overturned because there's no real
junk science.
Junk science. Thank you. This is the word I was looking for. But they did collect D.B. Cooper's hair. And this hair was last seen in the FBI, in the Las Vegas FBI office in 1984. Now, if we had that hair now, we could get DNA from it very, very, very easily. And they would plug that into GEDmatch or whatever, just like they did with the Golden State Killer, and find Cooper's third cousin. And if you find Cooper's third or fourth cousin on Ancestry or whatever, then you can find D.B. Cooper pretty quickly. Yeah. And so that hair slide is missing, though. And a lot of folks who are listening might go, well, what about cigarettes? And this is true. Cooper smoked at least 7 cigarettes. They recovered 8 cigarettes from Cooper's. For those old enough like us to remember, airlines used to have cigarette ashtrays in the seat. The armrest, on the armrest, and they recovered 8 cigarette butts. Now, 7 of these were Cooper, and 1 was the stewardess. Cooper peer pressured Tina Mucklow into smoking one. They started discussing cigarette smoking, and she goes, "Oh, well, I quit." And he goes, "Yeah, but I bet you still want one right now, don't you?" And she goes, "Yeah, sure." And so Tina had one of his Raleigh filter tip cigarettes. So they collected 7 Cooper cigarettes and 1 Tina Mucklow cigarette. Now, this is before DNA was known to be a thing. And so they only took these cigarettes out to look for fingerprints. And when they determined there were no fingerprints on them, they threw them in the trash. So, and you could easily right now get DNA from those cigarettes if they still had them. Just a terrible nightmare that they threw these away. And so they got rid of the D.B. Cooper cigarettes back in December of 71. But the hair slide, that is on a microscope slide, and that does have a evidence tag on it. So nobody's throwing that away. That is lost somewhere. And I have filed FOIAs with the government to go look for it, and they have looked for it and can't find it. And, but it's somewhere in some, lost and found folder in some FBI office somewhere. But that really, either finding that hair slide, or finding somebody with the money. The problem is, if Cooper kept some of the money, let's just say Cooper kept, I don't know, $200 of it as a keepsake.
Yeah.
So 10 20s. Well, Junior's going through dad's crap when dad dies and finds some 20s. Well, he'll go spend it.
Right.
He won't know the significance of these things.
Yeah, that people don't know to check the series or whatever. Yeah.
No, not at all. And so, that's the sad reality, is that when most of us die, our stuff just goes in the trash. And so, from whoever comes and cleans our house out. And so, that Cooper's evidence from Cooper probably got thrown in the trash at some point. Yeah. That'd be my take. And so, I don't think the only way I think this ever gets solved is if they find the hair slide eventually.
Yeah. Well, what do you make of the whole tie thing and all the stuff on it? I'm very skeptical of that. I feel like it's just kind of a red herring. It's a little too it's way out of my knowledge level, where it's like it's these different chemical compounds and we trace them to a place in Pennsylvania that might be the only place you could get it and shit. And it's just like
it changes every year. That's the problem, is that
right.
So basically, Cooper's tie, like I said, was the only thing we have of his that we know belonged to him is this necktie. Okay. And now there is DNA, there is quote unquote DNA, Cooper DNA out there. Okay. Because in the early 2000s, they did DNA testing on this tie, and they found 3 very, very partial DNA profiles. Okay. Like so partial that from 3 different individuals, okay, but they are so partial that millions of people would have a match with one of these. Okay, so it's like it's useless.
Right.
But also on the tie were found very, very, very rare chemicals, metal parts. Essentially, the tie is filthy. Now back then, people wore neckties all the time.
Right.
Even in like factory settings. If you were middle management, that is how people knew you were a middle management, is you wore a necktie. That noted you from the plebs, it was you wore a tie, right? So
and people wore ties when they were going on planes and shit. That's like, that was the style back then.
That's just people wore ties. And so there's this tie but it is covered in all kinds of metallurgy stuff, which does relate a lot of it to the aerospace industry though. And there has been some thought that Cooper had ties to the aerospace industry because he seemed to know a thing or two about an airplane. And he understood plane physics and things. And he was telling the pilots to fly unpressurized and all this other stuff. And so he seemed to know what he was doing with airplanes. And so, but again, this tie is analyzed every year with electron microscopes, and they are finding new chemicals and elements on this tie every single year. Right. And there's just it just changes. And like I said, it's almost like a red herring. It's almost like it's so convoluted that there's no answer to be found in it.
Right.
You're at a certain point, you're looking for Jesus in the toast, as they say. You're just looking for things to look for things. And I am not a tie person. I kind of ignore it because honestly, the fact is that we don't know. I mean, we know it was Cooper's tie. I mean, because it was found literally, the FBI found it sitting in his seat.
Right.
Okay. Now, Cooper likely intended to take it with him, but he had a brain fart. And I always tell people, look, when you're a man and you take a tie off, what is the very first thing you do is you throw it on whatever's closest to you. You throw it on your bed, whatever. Just almost like a reflex. You take a tie off, you toss it. And I think when Cooper was putting on his parachute, he took his tie off and tossed it on the seat, intending to just grab it and put it in his coat or whatever. Because Cooper did take everything else with him. Look, Cooper took empty matchbooks with him. I mean, Tina is lighting his cigarettes for him with a matchbook. Yeah. And she strikes the last match and throws it in the seat pocket to just like trash. And he goes, no, give that back to me. It's like, what? So even his empty, matchbook, she gives back to him, which is just. Yeah,
I'm surprised he didn't like grab the cigarette butts and throw them out when he was too.
Well, I guess before DNA, he didn't think anything about it. And also another thing too, Cooper did not leave any fingerprints behind because Cooper was obfuscating his fingerprints somehow. And we're pretty positive about this now. At least I am positive on this because all of the fingerprints that they have found, basically the FBI found lots of fingerprints on the plane, but all the fingerprints from Cooper's area were all partial fingerprints. Okay, all of them were partial, and it was only certain parts of the finger. And one of my buddies now, a guy named John Detler, I have an interview with him on my webpage, on my YouTube channel. John Detler was one of the original three FBI guys assigned to the case right as it happened. And he is still alive. He is in his mid 80s. And, you know, it's nice to be able to text a guy who was the original case agent and say, hey,
yeah.
I'm like, hey, John, how you doing? You know, yada, yada. You know, how about the Seattle Seahawks? You know, they're good, you know. But I'll also say, back then, John, you were an FBI guy in the 60s and 70s. Did these guys put glue on their fingertips to hide their fingerprints? Like Zodiac Killer in one of his letters says, I have used airplane glue on my fingers, you know.
Yeah.
Something Zodiac Killer said. And John said, yeah, that was one thing that criminals did back then. And so it seems like Cooper did that because they have all these partial fingerprints, but they do have Cooper's palm print. Okay. So when Cooper got up from his seat, imagine yourself getting up from your airline seat, you're pushing off with your palm on the chair. Yeah. And he left a palm impression. Well, the problem is with the palm impression is the military to this day do not take palm prints from people who are in the military.
Right. Yeah.
And law enforcement did not start taking palm prints until the early 2000s. So there are no palm prints on record back then of people. And so one thing the FBI would do when they would investigate suspects who were getting all bitchy saying, hey, I'm tired of being investigated, they would say, okay, well, give us your palm print. And they go, okay. And that's how they would rule people out immediately. Like, okay, well, palm print doesn't match. Famously, Robert Rackstraw is a famous D.B. Cooper suspect. Rackstraw, he was eliminated. His palm print didn't match. Richard McCoy, his palm print didn't match. So they've got Cooper's palm print, and they have all these partial fingerprints. But at any rate, Cooper did leave his tie on the plane, and he threw it in his seat. So we do know it's Cooper's tie. Problem is, we don't know where Cooper picked it up.
Right.
His brother's tie. It could have been something he just found or whatever. We don't really know. How long he
could have got it that morning. Yeah, he could have got it that morning
that morning. So we know it's Cooper's tie, but we don't know. So really investigating the metals on it it's a lead. I do not fault anybody for that. I mean, please investigate these leads. I mean, my webpage, norjack.org, has all these chemicals listed on there.
It's a fantastic. I wanted to mention that too. Yeah, it's a fantastic website. It's comprehensive.
I mean, I support tie particle research because it is really the only thing we have, and it may bear fruit. But personally, again, I'm not trying to catch Cooper, and that's kind of a weird thing to say. I'm not.
Right.
I let other people do that. My focus is on telling the story accurately, so other people can have accurate information to use for their investigations.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I got tripped up on talking to Pat a couple of years ago was the bag. He had like a bag.
Mystery bag, yeah.
Yes, this mystery bag. I can't because it's just always described as like a bag. And there's very little sort of information on the bag. It's just like and that's such a maddening concept. It's like saying someone had a box. It's like there could be a million different kinds of boxes.
It's probably
a bag. Yeah.
It's probably the most misunderstood or misknown or unknown part of this entire case is that Cooper had this bag with him. Cooper is always described or always seen on TV shows as carrying a briefcase, and that's it.
Right.
Cooper also was carrying a bag with him in addition to this briefcase. In the bag, at one point, Cooper goes to the bathroom. When the plane lands, Cooper stands up and goes to the bathroom because he's a middle-aged man and probably has to go pee. He's in there for a couple minutes. And now he carries his briefcase bomb like a pizza box, okay, on its side, like flat. And he puts this bag on top of it. And that is when people see this bag, when he's carrying this briefcase around with this bag on top. And the bag was described as being about the same, slightly smaller width and length as the briefcase, but about 4 inches thick. So it had something in it. Okay, so it's tall, but it's about the size of the briefcase. And now what is in this bag is unknown because whatever was in the bag was never used during the hijacking. Because the only thing Cooper miracled out of thin air were some cigarettes and matches and a pocket knife. Okay, so whatever was in this bag was not used during the hijacking, which means that whatever was in this bag would have only been used for his escape or his jump. Okay, so the FBI, remember, we have all their internal investigative files now. They are speculating at the time that he may have had jump boots in there, or goggles, gloves, skydiving gear, altimeters, and rope, and all kinds of different things. And we know from the copycats, again, humans do things very similarly always. For example, there's a field of history called it's called like I forget what it's called, but it's a type of archaeology where people will dress up, not reenactments, but like I forget what it's called, but basically people will say, oh, well, you know, how did the Roman soldiers wear their gear? Well, they would wear their gear the same way you and I would, whatever's comfortable. You know, a human body hasn't changed in 2,000 years. Criminals are going to do things similar to other criminals just because that's how humans do certain things. And we know from these copycat hijackers that a lot of them, in addition to a bomb, had a bag of various miscellaneous things with them for their jumps, goggles, gloves, you know, gear. So it stands to reason that Cooper had that too. And so we have this image of Cooper jumping off the stairs, Geronimoing in a business suit. Just nilly. But the fact is, Cooper was in the back for 30 minutes before he jumped. So we don't really know what Cooper looked like when he jumped. I like to provide illustrations for people that show Cooper wearing goggles and gloves and a beanie on his head and things, you know, just because people go, oh, well, I'll be damned. I never thought of Cooper looking like that, but he may have. We just don't know. And so when people poo-poo Cooper survive and they go, oh, well, he jumped in a business suit, we don't know what he jumped looking like because we just don't know. And in fact, we do know that whatever he had in this bag was sizable enough that it was noticeable, and it had to be something for his escape. So J. Edgar Hoover himself thought it was jump boots. What's interesting about this case is one of the great things about this case is J. Edgar Hoover dies in March of 72. Now, Hoover was very involved. I mean, Hoover was a hands-on FBI director. I mean, very, very hands-on. And so you'll see these memos in these FBI files that have been released where it's like, you know, from the director to Seattle FBI office, from the director. And it's like all these words and things. And I was able to ask again, knowing the guy, I could text John Detler, this FBI agent from back then. I say, hey, John, these memos I'm looking at where it says director, is this J. Edgar Hoover himself? He's like, oh yeah, that's the boss. He's like, so when it says from the director, do you think that this man's bag might have had jump boots in it? That is J. Edgar Hoover himself saying, I got jump boots in it. So it's kind of cool.
So he's like sitting around in the FBI. He's as puzzled about the case as us. Because he's a law enforcement guy. And what's great too is the name Norjak. Norjak is the code name for the case. That's why it's my website, Norjak. Norjak stands for, it's kind of I forget it's not an anagram. I forget what the term is, but it stands for Northwest hijacking. Okay, Northwest Airlines hijacking, Norjak, Northwest hijacking. Okay. And what's interesting is that, and the original spelling was Norjack, and this was proposed by a Portland FBI agent to J. Edgar Hoover, and we have the FBI file where J. Edgar Hoover himself sends it back saying, I want you to spell it this way, Norjak. And so J. Edgar Hoover himself is to be thanks for Norjak. It's kind of cool, you know? That's wild.
But anyway, so he was involved. But so Cooper has this mystery bag, and we don't know what's in it. We'll never know what was in it. But whatever it was, I mean, look, the bottom line is that, and I just released a video on my webpage today on my YouTube channel where I talk about what I think is the best evidence for Cooper surviving. And in my opinion, the best evidence is this money that was found in 1980. Okay, so a lot of people who are listening know the D.B. Cooper case. They know that about $6,000 was found on a sandbar along the Columbia River, a place called Tino Bar, in 1980 by an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram who was digging a fire pit about 30 feet from the shoreline. Well, this is a mystery almost as big as the Cooper case itself, because nothing makes sense about why this money was found there. The condition it was in makes no sense. Why it would be buried there, how it got buried there. I mean, basically items, and through research and through discussions with hydrologists and things, it seems like a human buried it there.
Yeah.
A human being buried this money there. It did not wash up on shore, because things do not wash up on shore and then bury themselves. That just happened.
Yeah.
And so it was buried at some point by a human 30 feet from the shoreline of the Columbia River for some reason, and $6,000, not $10,000, whatever. But this was always used as an argument that Cooper died. They say, okay, well, look, a thief would be with his money. Cooper, if it washed up on shore, Cooper lands in the Columbia River because the plane does go over the Columbia River. But I would say that actually my argument is this is the best evidence for his survival. And the reason is we know where Cooper jumped. There is no diggity doubt about this. Okay. This airplane was being pinged by Air Force radar. It was a bogey. Okay. It was a hijacked aircraft. Its transponder code was squawking, hijack, hijack, hijack.
Yeah.
Like, stay away, And the Air Force radar treated it like a bogey. Okay. So any plane that is transponding hijack plane, the Air Force SAGE radar, which was the NORAD of the time, it became NORAD. SAGE radar would start recording its location every 5 seconds because it's a bogey in U.S. airspace. And it would record it on a hard drive in real time, which is really high-tech stuff back then.
Yeah.
So we know where this plane was at all times that night. I mean, at all times. I mean, within a quarter-mile zone. And we know when Cooper jumped because this pressure spike happened, and we have the transcript audio. Well, we have the transcript of the audio. Maybe one day we'll have the audio, but we have the transcript of the audio of the pilot going, "Oh, what's this? Sorry, sorry, my headset came off my head," because he turned to look at the gauges and his headset got off. Anyway, then that happened at 8:11. So we know when Cooper jumped 8:11, and we know where the plane was at 8:11. So we know where Cooper jumped out, and Cooper jumps out about 20 miles away from the river.
Yeah.
Okay. So Cooper is not, I say in the video, unless Cooper falls into a wormhole, like he is not landing in the Columbia River that night. So to explain why some of his money is found away, 20 miles away from where he jumps out with Cooper dying.
Right.
You have to come up with some scenario where somebody finds his body in the woods, pokes it with a stick or something, and then takes some of the money off his body, then buries the body where nobody finds it for 50 years. And then for some reason that person goes and buries it 20 miles away. It's a lot more likely that the reason that the money is on Tina Bar, it's a lot more likely that the reason money was found outside the drop zone is because Cooper himself got outside the drop zone at some point.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the best evidence for Cooper's survival. And look, there's just no evidence Cooper died. I mean, look, parachutes are actually, maybe, if you want to call parachuting a form of transportation, it might be the safest form of transportation there is on Earth. And I'm not kidding. Essentially, according to the USPA, that's the U.S. Parachute Association, according to their fatality rate index, which is a thing, in 1970, there were 3 fatalities per 100,000 skydives. Okay, now that is like that is like 99.999% chance of surviving skydive. Now, granted, not every skydive happens off the back of a 727 at night, but even if it was like 20 times more dangerous than the average skydive, which it wasn't, that still leaves Cooper with like a 99.99998% survival.
Yeah, I don't understand the people that think that I guess I know it's an argument, I guess, but to me, it's like, that's unfathomable. Like, if he lived, like, of course
it's silly.
They would have found the body by now somewhere. I mean,
up in a tree or something.
Right.
Well, I mean, look, they were looking for, they flew over that place looking for parachutes hung up in trees. They were looking for buzzards, vultures, circling.
Exactly.
I mean, they were looking for these things. And I mean, they scoured the area where he jumped out. And people have been to that area look, this is something else that your listeners should know about, is that I often have, in fact, one of my videos on my YouTube channel, DB Cooper Sleuth, is about the top myths of the Cooper hijacking.
Yeah.
One of them is that Cooper jumps into a wilderness. Not true. Cooper jumped into a county with a 1971 census population of 130,000 people. Okay. Cooper is jumping 20 miles north of Portland, Oregon. Okay. I mean, you are not jumping into the wilderness if you're 20 minutes away from a city that has an NBA team in 1970.
Yeah.
And that's my argument. And like the trailblazers were already there. Okay.
Yeah.
So like, and again, this county, the county he jumps into, there's 500,000 people living there now. Okay. That area has been developed and, cultivated. And, again, Cooper, he's just not jumping into the Yukon or somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
He's able. In fact, the reason we think he jumps where he jumps is because he can, according to pilots who we had some at the CooperCon, pilots from that era who flew up and down this area a lot. You can start to see the lights of Portland coming up in the distance as you fly south from Seattle. You can start to see the lights of Portland coming up around the area where Cooper jumps. And so the thought is that Cooper doesn't want to jump too close to civilization because you run the risk of landing on a cop car stopped at a four-way stop.
Yeah.
Right. But you don't want to jump in the actual wilderness because if you jump over blackness, you might be jumping into a lake or something for all you know.
Exactly. Right.
So you want a Goldilocks zone. And again, we can talk to copycat hijackers, and I have one on speed dial, Martin McNally, who is still alive, did the same stunt. He jumped out with $502,000 6 months later. He's still alive. Marty talked about, I was just looking for a place that wasn't too busy but had some life to it, so I could get to a car or something if I needed to, a hitchhike or something.
Yeah, civilization, yeah.
Some civilization. And so this is probably why Cooper jumped where he jumps, in my opinion. He jumps somewhere near a town called La Center, Washington, Woodland, Washington, which is in northern Clark County, Washington, about 20 minutes north of Portland. But yeah, he's not jumping in a wilderness. I don't know what's going to kill him. I mean, again, another thing too, Cooper jumps with an emergency backpack. Okay, so Cooper did not, for whatever reason, did not specify the types of parachutes he wanted. He said, I want 2 backpacks, 2 front packs. And they bring him 2 military backpacks that are emergency backpacks. That's why they didn't have these D rings to clip these front packs on, because if you're in the military, you're lucky to have 1 parachute if you're a pilot. So and also pilots cannot wear front packs or whatever because they have to control the plane. So their backpacks don't have these hooks. But Cooper's backpack was an emergency bailout rig specifically built by the military for people who are jumping out of death spiraling aircraft that have been shot down.
There you go. Yeah.
People who have never jumped out of airplanes before. I mean, this is essentially like a life preserver. It is a standard orange life preserver. Right. As for parachutes. And they are literally designed to open regardless if you are spinning out of control. As long as you pull the ripcord, it will open and blossom out. And
precisely the kind of one you want maybe for a job like this. Yeah.
So nothing is going to kill the guy as long as he pulls the ripcord. And again, he only had the rest of his life to figure out how to pull that ripcord, as they say. The joke goes. And in fact, if I'm Cooper, I'm jumping off already holding on to the ripcord. I mean, and also,
and presumably, obviously we don't know, but it's like this presumably was not this guy's first rodeo jumping on the plane.
Tina Mucklow, who was the stewardess who spent all this time with Cooper, she tells the FBI that he looks like he had put on the parachute as if it was, she said he put on a parachute as if it was an everyday occurrence.
There you go.
So he just threw it on really quickly, clip, 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 clip. And
right. Yeah. Hand me one of those things. Yeah. I'm all thumbs, where's this thing go? I don't even know how to. Yeah.
Right. Now, of course, as a defense attorney, I would say, objection, Your Honor. I would say the witness, how does she know what it looks like when someone puts on a parachute? It would just, that's the clever lawyer trick. But she's still again, the fact that he's even doing this and as calm as he can be about it, indicates that he had done this before. And
right. Now, what do you think of the Air America angle? I'm a big fan of that theory.
Great theory.
Yeah. Seems to answer some questions as far as how this guy knew about the specifics of the plane and sort of that this could be done. Wasn't that the whole thing? They were like, I don't know if this can even really. Basically. No, it can do it. It can do it.
Yeah. So Air America, they were, for those who don't know, that was the CIA's fake airline that they would use to fly over and drop supplies into Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, because the North Vietnamese were not shooting down commercial airliners flying around. And so they basically disguised commercial airliners as transport planes. And what they would do, because the 727s had these rear stairs, had a rear access point, what they would do is they would shove supplies on they would remove the stairs, and they installed ramps, and they would just shove supplies and even men out the back of these planes.
Yeah.
Into Southeast Asia, into places, into Laos and Cambodia, places that they weren't supposed to be dropping supplies for our special forces guys. So now, one of the things that Cooper tells the pilots, one of these weird things he says, and this is actually in the audio on my webpage that I found, is, and the pilots are kind of weird, the pilots are kind of discussing it. They're like, well, why is he saying this? But he wants the flaps. He said, Cooper says, I want the plane to be flown with the flaps set at 15 degrees, fly at 10,000 feet, flaps down and gear down. Okay. Well, it turns out it was discovered a few years ago that when Air America 727s would do their airdrops, they flew at 10,000 feet, flaps at 15 with gear down. Right. So Cooper tells them to fly the exact specifications that Air America were flying, their 727s. And it's interesting, in the audio, you can actually hear the pilots, they're going, I don't know where this guy is coming up with this stuff, but like, right. He's telling us to do this stuff. And yeah, the pilots didn't know if it was safe to fly with the stairs down or no stairs at all. But Cooper seemed to know it could be done, or at least, I don't want to say that Cooper was Air America, but he was at the worst, he was somehow tangentially related to it somehow. He knew somebody. I mean, so somehow he knew this stuff. And it is fitting with his age as well, because Cooper is described as mid-40s to late 40s. The FBI believe he is roughly, the FBI's approximate age is 48 for Cooper. He was described as having a wrinkled older mouth. He had a receding hairline. He was described as balding, kind of an ugly, kind of like, and the stewardesses weren't very generous. They said he was homely, which is a polite way of saying kind of ugly. Yeah. But he was older, and they gave him the vibe of like their dad's generation. He's a guy who's 50 years old, but most of the Air America were mercenaries. Okay. Think of like Blackwater or whatever in Iraq. These are ex-military guys who have kind of aged out of the military, but they still have the bug to go get combat, or they still want to make some money, and they're military contractors. So Air America guy were military contractors. These guys, they're called cargo kickers, the guys who were actually either flying these planes or the guys in the back who were shoving this shit out the back of the plane. Right. These were all contractors. So in the average age, I have an article from 1972 from an Air America personnel saying that my average age of my employees is 44 years old. So that's right in Cooper's age. Yeah. And again, these are mercenaries. Okay. Most of these guys were kind of rascals. They weren't, Boy Scouts at all. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was kind of
what I was thinking in a way too, that like, maybe this guy knew things that, I mean, the FBI was clearly trying to find him, but it was like, maybe he had some kind of protection in a way where he like knew, possibly, was like, well, look, we can't, CIA sitting there going, it's Randy fucking Carruthers, that guy we had on the mission. You remember how he kept talking about how he would rob a fucking plane this way?
Well, let's not forget.
And they're like, we don't tell Hoover that about fucking and again, Randy Carruthers, because we know it's him. We know
anybody who knows bureaucratic squabbling knows that the FBI and the CIA do not get along. Right. They never have. Look, 9/11 would probably not have happened if they had been better friends, the FBI and the CIA, because they just weren't communicating at all about threats. And so, it's possible that the CIA we're not going to cooperate with the FBI. But the FBI did investigate Air America as much as they could. Right. But we don't know how much though, because a lot of these files that we get are redacted.
Yeah.
And anything relating to the CIA is going to be redacted in these files, and so we don't really know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ted Braden is a suspect. Drew Beeson was on your show. He's
a big
wrote a book on Braden. I love Braden. Braden's one of my favorite suspects. I think Braden's too short. I think Cooper's about 6 feet tall. Braden's about 5'8", 5'7". That's just too short for me. But Braden's a guy who obviously had friends in high places because he kept getting arrested for committing major crimes. And then, like something out of Rambo or something, some guy walks down the jail and says, all right, we got a job for you to do. And he gets out of jail. I mean, Ted Braden keeps getting arrested. There's always articles of Ted Braden being arrested for major thefts. And then there's nothing. He's back on the streets.
Yeah.
And somebody spotted him in Honduras or somewhere, or in Panama. And it's like, okay. Yeah, the CIA it's not like a conspiracy thing to say that the CIA have spooks. They really do have spooks. I mean, this is not a joke. I mean, you talk about, not again in 9/11, there were guys in Afghanistan like the next day. In fact, I forget his name, but the first American killed after 9/11 was a CIA spook, basically, who was in Afghanistan. So, I mean, these guys are real people, and this is a real thing, and they could have been protected. So, but I think more so that Cooper was just maybe one of these Air America guys who was a bit on the outskirts of the law a little bit, who saw an opportunity to make a lot of money really quickly and had an idea. And he painted his Da Vinci, essentially. This was a Da Vinci heist, and just got away with it. And he got lucky being the first, because he caught everybody by surprise. And there's a lot of there's a lot of capital to be gained by being the first to do something. Yeah. And by being the first, he really caught them by surprise. Yeah.
And again, especially too on the the night before Thanksgiving, like everything seemed, it was just the perfect heist. It really, really was amazing.
Very, very ingenious on his part, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm not particularly a fan of AI in general, right? But have you anyone in the community considered sort of like, you have all these files now, like feeding them into the whatever the hell it is, the AI machine, and see, has it produced anything particularly interesting?
No, and the problem is because so much of it's redacted.
Yeah,
it can't fill in those blanks, and so it's kind of useless.
All right.
Yeah. Now, the big use for AI though is that all of the money that was given to Cooper, all of the serial numbers were recorded. Okay, right. So we have all 10,000 $20 bill serial numbers recorded. Now, none of these have ever shown up in circulation, except for the money that was found on the sandbar. Mm-hmm. But all of these 10,000 numbers have been put onto an algorithm or something. I don't know how to describe it, but basically, we've had some AI guys, some computer programmers who basically have a program that's running nonstop all the time online that has all 10,000 serial numbers, and it's scraping the internet looking for these serial numbers. Because if you go on eBay or something and look up 1969 series $20 bill, people are selling these. And because they're collector's items, because people will sell old currency. And so whenever they do this, they will put the entire serial number in the listing.
Okay. That's so, yeah. Unbeknownst to them, they may have what they think is just a cool old 20. Mm-hmm. Turns out it's from the case.
Correct. Yeah. So AI is scraping the internet at all times, looking for any of the 10,000 serial numbers. So that is a good use of AI.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I kind of was skeptical myself that you could just kind of type in like, all right, read all these files and tell me who D.B. Cooper is. It's not really.
No, it's just we have tried. It's just too redacted to do that.
Yeah. What you said? What are some of the other myths surrounding the case that maybe I might not be aware of?
Well, I guess the myths would just be, like I said, the wilderness was a myth. That he jumped in a business suit's a myth.
Right.
That's just not true. Well, one of the myths was that he jumped with a dummy parachute.
Right.
But now we know he did.
Yeah.
Because they all, so, but I guess that I would just say that the main myth is that he didn't know what he was doing and that he jumped into a wilderness. People are like, oh, he needed to have survival. He needed to like survive in the wilderness. No.
Yeah. You hear that a lot. Yeah.
I mean, literally wherever he jumps out, he is, if you look at a map, if Cooper pulls his parachute immediately at 10,000 feet, the wind was at 10 miles an hour to the northeast at the time. Cooper's parachute's going to push him about 3 miles to the northeast.
Yeah.
Okay. Where he lands, he is within 5 miles of I-5 interstate, anywhere he lands.
Yeah.
So like he's not far away. Now, one of the other myths, I guess, is the weather. People say, oh, it was a freezing rainstorm. He jumped in a blizzard or he jumped. No.
Yeah.
We have the actual files now. We have the National Weather Service data from where he jumped out at the time that they gave the FBI. It was 42 degrees, light rain showers at the time. So like basically Pacific Northwest weather for that time of year. Nothing crazy. And jumping, parachuting in light rain is not a big deal at all, actually.
Yeah. So he lands on the ground, right? We're supposed to play the scenario out. So he lands on the ground. Now he's got the 2 parachutes, right? So when the one he deployed, I don't know how this works. Is it like the proverbial can of worms or whatever, or the toothpaste that's a better one. Is it like the toothpaste in the bottle where once he blows out this
back in the bottle, just explodes?
Can he stuff it back in? Can he stuff it back in? Okay.
Sure.
He's not like walking around dragging a giant purple tarpaulin. Okay.
No, Cooper, obviously, I mean, again, we can look at what the copycats did. And as soon as they landed, they took their gear off and they stashed everything.
Okay. Right.
And they kind of remembered where they were and came back and got it at a later time. So my thought is that Cooper did not know. Look, there were no boots on the ground where Cooper jumped out because they didn't know what this pressure bump meant precisely yet.
Yeah. They thought it was instantaneous search. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It had a little bit of time.
A lot of time.
Maybe. Okay.
40 hours. There were no boots on the ground for 40 hours in the county where he jumped out. So he had a way big head start. You give any bank robber a 40-hour head start, he's going to get away. Almost certainly. So, yeah, Cooper lands, takes his crap off, stashes it under some bushes or something, and then just starts walking to figure out where he is. I mean, all Cooper needs to do is walk west, and he's going to run into I-5 interstate at some point. Yeah. And from there, he can figure out where he is. I mean, I don't know if he had an accomplice.
That's my next question. Yeah.
I don't think so because nobody has talked about it. And the more people as I say, the only way to keep a secret is to tell no one. And
right.
So I don't think he had an accomplice, but if he had an accomplice, the way you would do it is you would tell your accomplice to go park his ass at a safe house or park his ass at the hotel and say, look, I don't know when I'm going to jump. I don't know where I'm going to jump, but whenever I jump, I will eventually get to a phone and I will call you and let you know where I am. So just sit by the phone.
Yeah.
So that's probably what Cooper did if he had an accomplice. That's really the only way you could do it because Cooper had no idea where he was jumping.
Mm-hmm. That seems like how it would play out. Yeah. And that brings me back to what you said earlier about bank robberies, where it's like, if he had the accomplice, that increases the odds that someone would talk. Unless it was like a family member or a son or something like that, or a wife. And then even then it's like, who knows? Yeah. So
I just think Cooper to me seems like a loner.
Yeah. Well, I kind of figure he must have done a considerable amount of like planning for this. This isn't something that he just did on a whim. I mean, I'm sure he thought it through at least. Like, okay, I'm going to do this and then that. You think it only took him a few days to really put?
Yeah. And the reason is because it isn't his heist, actually. 13 days.
Well, it's the Canadian thing. Yeah.
Canadian, yes. Paul Sini, the first parachute hijacker attempt was a drunken Canadian idiot about 13 days earlier, boarded a plane, asked for a ransom, and he brought a parachute with him, and he was going to jump out of the plane with his ransom, and it was national news. Parachuting hijacker. He was distracted momentarily trying to untie his parachute from a bag he had it in, and a male flight attendant hit him upside the head with an axe and bludgeoned him, and he failed. But that was national news, and I always joke that it's like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme of him pointing at the TV, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like Super's watching TV going, "Oh shit, I can do that." There's an idea. So the FBI are really certain, and I'm pretty confident too, just given the timing of it, that Cooper was inspired by that and said, "Okay, I can do that. I can do that better." Hold my beer, sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Yeah, because really, it doesn't require that much planning. Really, you just need to make a fake bomb and figure out and write some ransom notes and things. Really.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's not like you needed to practice parachuting if he had the experience.
Right. Again, especially if he's a paratrooper or a special forces guy. These guys were jumping into Vietnam and stuff. Like Ted Braden I talked about earlier. Ted Braden jumped into North Vietnam, with two other guys. Like, how scary is that? Jumping over Washington State is not terrifying compared to that. It was a Wednesday for a guy like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Is there anything about the case that sort of like keeps you up at night, still like vexes you? One aspect, we talked about the mystery bag. Is there any sort of little detail that you go back to where you're like, I really like to know the answer to that?
The stewardess reportedly told an author that only one author ever was able to really talk to the stewardess back then. It was a former FBI agent named Richard Tusaw. He wrote a book in the early 80s called D.B. Cooper, Dead or Alive.
Yeah.
And this FBI agent, or this former FBI agent, Tusaw, he was a lawyer, obsessed with the D.B. Cooper hijacking. I can relate.
Yeah.
But anyway, he spoke to her, and in his book, he writes that Cooper pulled out the packing cards from these parachutes and looked at them. Now, packing cards are things that allow you to look under the hood of a parachute without opening it up. They're these little paper cards that are hidden in weird kind of places, weird little pockets of a parachute. And the guy a rigger is a person who packs a parachute. Every time they pack a parachute, they sign the card. Mm-hmm. I packed this parachute on this and such date. My rigger's license is this. And then they fold the card back up and they stuff it back in this little hidden pocket.
Right.
Now, in this book, it talks about Cooper looking at these packing cards. That is not in the FBI files anywhere at all. And I guess that's kind of something I would like to know, because that would really give us an indication on Cooper's. Like, we could basically eliminate every suspect who is not a expert parachutist.
Yeah.
Like, nobody who is not a skydiver or a parachutist knows about packing cards. Okay.
And they're that hard to find in the thing?
They are. Okay. They are, actually. And so I would like, basically, that's the one question. If I could ever talk to her, she is still alive, I would say, is this true? Did you tell him, this author, this? I mean, she may have forgotten it by now, but I'm like, is this true? Because that would allow us to eliminate anybody who is not an expert parachutist, really.
Yeah.
So that's one question that I would really like to know, because that would thin the herd a lot.
Yeah, it seems that way. But but Tina's not interested really in the limelight or being a part of the community or anything.
Not at all.
I mean, I don't blame her at all. It's like there's a lot of obsessives in all these different cases, and it's like, I imagine, I was just at a thing with the Dover Demon and the guy's brother, the little creature that they saw in Massachusetts.
Right.
And the guy's brother was there, and he was like, he doesn't want anything to do with this. He doesn't want people come try to bother him all the time about this fucking little creature he saw. So I can imagine she's kind of, after 50 years, she's probably like, I'm all set. I don't want to.
Yeah, I think she's and it's sad because, she has been creeped out by a lot of people. who have been obsessives, and it hurts people like myself who are just historians who just want.
Right.
I'm not going to bother her. I just want an answer, but
Yeah.
I can't get a hold of her. I've tried, so it's a bummer.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's a real hindrance to this. Yeah, because like I think her sitting down with you and talking for a couple hours would be very beneficial to the case and just for the historical record.
For the record, exactly. I mean, just for posterity.
Right. Yeah.
To actually know the truth about certain things.
Yeah. But you are in contact with the young football playing guy who.
Yeah. Well, Bill Mitchell, the college kid. Yeah. I mean, him, and there are other passengers who are alive, and Pat Boland is in contact with one of the other stewardesses. So, I mean, one of the stewardesses talks a little bit. But again, this was so long ago that they don't remember much at all. Really.
Yeah. And it was just a few hours of their life, right? Correct. It's like,
if you were a hostage for, 3 hours in a Burger King or something, and 50 years ago, you kind of remember, I mean, look, we have the FBI files now, and we have the stewardesses telling the FBI, even in like 1973, please stop showing me photographs of suspects because I have forgotten what the guy looks like.
Right.
This is in like 1973.
Yeah.
So you try 50 years later, it's just no way.
Yeah. It's an incredible case in a lot of ways because it was like right on the cusp of like
modern era sort of.
Yeah. And like all kinds of shit came into play later that would make this so impossible, like cameras everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And DNA. And like this kind of really slipped through the cracks perfectly at just the right time. A crime like this.
But it's a very vexing case. It's frustrating as hell, but I hate it, but I love it at the same time.
It's a pretty awesome case. It really. Now, what do you think of the whole sort of? And I can see both sides of the coin. I have a feeling you can too, being an astute Southern lawyer type. But a lot of people are like, oh, D.B. Cooper, he's a hero, a folk hero, kind of. And then there's other people who are like, no, he was a crook. He was a miscreant. He really traumatized these people who were mixed up in all this. So I can see both sides of the coin. But it is, yeah.
I would say he's an asshole.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this is a guy who rolled out of bed that morning and had no problem, like didn't break a sweat, committing extortion, kidnapping, armed robbery, grand larceny, aircraft piracy. Assault,
terrorizing all these people.
Yeah, assault. And look, I mean, again, Bill Mitchell, the college kid who's now in his 70s, he's a 70-something-year-old grandpa. At CooperCon this year, he was crying on stage next to me because, in his older age, he has started to think about how, what if the bomb was real?
Yeah.
And what if something had happened and I had died? And his tears were not so much for himself. It's the fact that if I had died in 1971 because of some asshole's desire for money, my kids would never have existed. My grandkids would never have existed and had their lives. So, yeah, Cooper was not a good person. He is not Han Solo in a business suit. Is what we say. He's not some.
He's certainly not like Robin Hood. It's not like he
anybody.
Gave the money to anyone. Yeah.
Like the best way to describe the Cooper hijacking is it's a clever bank robbery. Yeah. So no one is describing a bank robber as a friendly. I mean, there are no friendly neighborhood bank robbers who are who are threatening to kill the 20-year-old clerk behind the counter. That's not a nice person, in my opinion. So I do not idolize Cooper at all. He was a dirty, rotten crook, as the FBI called him. But I will have some begrudging admiration for the balls it took to do that. It's innovative. It's clever. I mean, it's unique. I mean, and some of Cooper, Cooper had neurodivergent thinking, obviously. He was able to think outside the box a lot. And look, I mean, the stewardess felt bad for him. Tina Mucklow, who's a sweetheart, she became a nun eventually, the stewardess.
Yeah.
Not because of this. She had always been religious, but she became a nun eventually. And, she said that she prayed for the guy the whole time. She was like, I don't know what in his life led him to this moment to be doing it.
Right. Yeah. You gotta.
Did he lose? Are his kids dead or something? I mean, what drove him to be so chilled out doing this?
Yeah, I mean, that aspect of it, it does almost.
It's kind of sad in a way.
Like, I believe that he survived the thing, the jump, but I also, in my mind, do feel like he also had almost like a suicide mission mindset, where he's like, look, I'm either,
We know from studying the copycats that a lot of them, the majority of them, were suffering from PTSD. Yeah. They were having mental breaks. And Cooper told Tina repeatedly, I will not be taken alive. I will die here today if I have to. And he seemed to mean it.
Yeah.
And that may have been why he was so calm, because he didn't care. Perhaps a couple of the copycats believed that they had terminal illnesses. And so I'm going to die anyway. So if I'm dead in a month from my cancer, then what does it matter? So it's kind of like people who, not to be too morbid, but people who have decided to kill themselves, they say a peace comes over them.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe Cooper was just suicidal and was kind of a sad character.
Well, it was interesting too. One of the things I picked up in the newfound audio was there was at the beginning of the piece that you put up on YouTube that you could hear him kind of discussing the possibility of rushing him in the aircraft, which that was kind of news to me. I didn't realize that they had even considered that. It sounds like they kind of didn't take it very, very far.
Well, because look, so back then the FBI, they don't do it now, of course, but back then, if you were the victim of a kidnapping or an extortion type thing like this, the FBI would say, hey, look, do you want us to intervene, or do you want to pay the ransom and we can catch the guy later? And so Northwest Airlines was like, stay the hell away. We will pay the ransom. Yeah. This guy's a bomb. We'll just give him what he wants. You can catch him later. And so Northwest Airlines made it very clear, all law enforcement stand down. And true to their word, the FBI did just sit on their hands until the passengers came off. They had nothing to do. They just sat around. No shenanigans, nothing. So
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what you mentioned that the suspect you're kind of looking at now is plausible, and you mentioned some other. How many ballpark would you say? Because I'm sure you've heard of countless suspects.
Oh yeah.
How many would you say are generally like plausible? What's the ballpark on the number of like that you've heard?
About 5.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe even fewer.
Wow.
I would say in my head, I could about 5 names I could rattle off that.
Yeah.
And sadly, the majority of them are not public suspects. They're not people that I'm allowed to discuss because of family or things like this. And I hate being that way, but I do want to respect people's privacy who contact me. But none of the names out there that are known are. One name. Skip Hall is a current suspect who has gotten some hype lately.
Yeah.
Skip is a plausible suspect for sure. Very plausible, in fact.
But they're few and far between is the point.
Yeah, there's a Canadian suspect his name is Lee Seller. He vanished the year of the hijacking. He dropped his kids off at his parents' house and never returned. He was a former World War II pilot and had the mob or somebody after him. He looks a lot like the sketch. He was living in the area at the time, and
that's a lot of the boxes.
Yeah, and so there are a few, but the ones that you hear about on TV shows, they're all shitty suspects. Really bad.
I get that impression. Yeah. and folks sometimes sort of like, I've seen this in all these other fields too. Folks like, at some point they cease to become a DB Cooper researcher and they become a suspect researcher.
Yes.
And that's their whole thing. And it's like,
Yeah.
are you even into, like, you just spend your time researching Randy Carruthers. You don't even like you have
confirmation bias too.
Yeah.
Bad and like, they'll believe that, oh, the plane, there's a guy named Walter Recca who's probably the worst suspect of all time. Walter Recca has a couple documentaries about him. Walter Recca has books about him. He is a horrible suspect. His whole thing, Walter Recca was a confessor.
Yeah.
He said he jumped out over Clayellum, Washington. Clayellum, Washington is 130 miles away from where the plane ever was.
Yeah.
And so all these books and movies are arguing, oh, the FBI and the Air Force, they all got it wrong. It's like, oh, okay. So air traffic control, the pilots, the Air Force, the FBI, they were following the wrong plane, I guess. I mean, it's obnoxious.
Yeah, well, that's what struck me when the whole found parachute thing came out. Like you said, the community debunked it like in 24 hours because it's like there's so much. It's a maddening mystery because there's so many details to it.
Yeah,
you would think that it would be easier to solve, but it's not. But we have so much.
People have their personal biases, and like the guy who found the parachute. We debunked his stuff with original FBI files saying, well, no, the parachute you have is a Air Force parachute. We know that Cooper was given a Navy parachute and of this sort of model. He's like, and his rebuttal online on YouTube was, well, if you believe the FBI, and it's like, okay.
Well, yeah, going in circles.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's just, but to wrap it up, the charm of this case is that it seems like it could be easily solved. Mm-hmm. But it's not.
Yes, exactly.
Like
that's the perfect.
It seems so damn close to being solved, but it's so far away.
Right.
It's a nightmare, but it's fun though. It's fun. So it's I say it's a living hell, but it's a lot of fun though. So definitely check out my webpage and definitely check out my YouTube channel for sure.
There you go. Now, I only got one last thing for us. What's next for you? We got to talk about the convention. Plug this because I'm going to try and make it out there this year. I can't make any promises, but I'm going to try to get out there. When is it? Where is it? And, how can folks find out?
dbcooperconference.com. Every year we have this conference and we have passengers from the plane there. We have other witnesses and all kinds of presenters and things. It's kind of like a DB Cooper festival for 3 days. And it's like, it's called CooperCon, DB CooperCon. It's a convention. People dress up and
it looks awesome.
It's a con. So it's fun, but it's every year, the middle of November. And it's in Vancouver every year. So,
right. And
Vancouver, Washington, like outside Portland. Not
right. That confused me at first too. Yeah. And folks, as I said before, find out more from you at norjak.org, NORJAK.org, and DB Cooper Sleuth. It's a podcast, also a YouTube channel. Check all that out. Ryan, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, giving me a whole bunch of time. I really appreciate it. And really going over this with a fine-tooth comb. I've had an absolute blast. I've really fallen in love with the whole Cooper community. I really love all you guys. I think it's a really fun. I'm not that deep enough to have the scars yet, but it seems like a fun community of folks who are working on this puzzle together and sort of from different angles, and it's just a really fun community. So, I hopefully can have more of the folks from that world on the show in the future, and you, of course, and in the future, because I had a blast, man.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and thank you for your contributions as well to setting the record straight on Coast to Coast.